Mester. Most folks call me Jessie, so you might know me by that name too. And I've really loved being involved as a ClinGen volunteer in several of the hereditary cancer working groups, and also as a member of the SVI, now the education working group, for whom this talk was first created. But I hope during our time today I'll be able to focus more specifically on some of the literature search, I guess, kind of tricks that I've learned over the years performing variant curation, both for ClinGen work as well as for my day job. So I do need to disclose that I am an employee of GeneDx, a wholly owned subsidiary of OPKO Health, where I do variant curation work as part of the inherited cancer team for variant workups and report writing. So some of the topics we're going to cover today are some ways to use nomenclature to the best of your ability to find all the potential literature that might be out there on a particular variant. As biocurators, our job is to try to find all of the literature that might pertain to a specific variant to help us apply criteria. And the first step is being able to build a search that helps you find the information you're looking for. We'll also go over some resources for where to look to help us find information. And I'll also talk you through some of the little speed bumps that you might come across during this process and ways you can overcome them. Okay, so first some background. So why are we doing a literature search in the first place? So we're trying to find articles that are going to allow us to apply specific ACMG criteria for the variant curation process. And the types of articles that are going to be helpful to us are quite broad. They might be very lab bench-based functional studies, looking at in vitro or in vivo or mouse assays to help us understand whether a variant has been functionally studied in the peer-reviewed literature. We might also come across clinical information, so case reports, family studies that are describing the phenotype of patients that have our variant of interest. Sometimes papers that focus on molecular characterization are very helpful. So papers that might focus on the specific residue in this variant for which your patient has a missense variant. Is this residue functionally important? How has it been shown to impact the protein if it's altered? And finally, some other studies that we might come across that can help us apply criteria are case control studies. So has this variant been identified in a whole bunch of control individuals, but no patients with our phenotype of interest, or vice versa? When we're doing literature search, we're going to have to keep an open mind. You know, we might have some inkling as to whether or not the variant is leaning more pathogenic or more benign when we start looking into it, but we want to keep an open mind and make sure that we're looking for literature that might either support pathogenicity or support a benign effect. Sometimes we might also be doing a literature search when this might be focused more on the gene curation aspect, or for a clinical person who's trying to better understand the variant found in their patient, but to help us understand the phenotypic spectrum. Maybe there are genotype-phenotype correlations that are present for a particular gene, and so we're looking to see whether our patient's variant has been really pinpointed to cause a specific phenotype, or whether it might cause multiple different phenotypes. And something that, I hope you'll understand by the end of our time together today is there's not one perfect tool that we have to use for literature searches. A combination of resources is typically necessary to help us find everything that we might like to look at for the purpose of our work. But there are some resources out there that have already compiled information that give us a really helpful starting point. One of them is HGMD, and I apologize if y'all are already familiar with all of these resources, but I'm just going to go through them briefly in case some folks aren't. So HGMD has both a professional and a free version. The professional version, unfortunately, costs money. It is quite expensive, but the free version does have some helpful literature compiled on a gene and variant basis. So you can go there, you can look up your gene, you can find if they have publications that cite your variant of interest, and find what those are to be able to review them. There are also some gene-specific databases out there. There are several maintained by LOVD, the locus-specific database list. But I would really encourage you is that if you're doing a bunch of curation for one specific disease or for a group of variants or a group of genes, get familiar if there is such a resource that's been curated for that condition. So I do a lot of work in the space of TP53, and there's the IARC database that was developed by some folks in France that has compiled functional studies. They have a very yearly updated review of all the literature describing TP53 variants and the clinical presentations, with links to all of the different PubMed IDs to help you be able to get to the source literature. These resources are wonderful, and it's great to become familiar with them so you understand where they get their information from. And especially for IARC, if it has some summaries of functional studies where it might categorize a variant as, for example, non-functional, you want to understand what that means. You want to make sure that meshes with the determination of non-functional, perhaps, that your expert panel that you're curating for has defined as well. And then another resource that you can go to perhaps quickly find some literature is ClinVar. Some submitters provide citations along with their interpretations and PubMed IDs that allow you to go directly to them to find information perhaps on a particular variant of interest. Now, no matter where you find your information from any of these resources, it's always critical to review the actual article yourself for a number of purposes. For one, you want to make sure that you're gathering all of the information that might be relevant to the variant curation process from each article. You also want to make sure that your specific variant is actually present. These resources are great and they're wonderful shortcuts, but there's mistakes present from time to time that you'll come across where there's a little bit of a nomenclature boo-boo. Or perhaps the phenotype is different from what might be listed in a table on the website itself. So I think it's really important to actually review the article itself to make sure that it's talking about your specific variant. Particularly in ClinVar, some submitters link to articles for a particular missense variant that does not contain your variant of interest, but it contains maybe a variant at another missense variant at the same residue, or the same variant caused by a different cDNA change, for which different ACMG criteria have been applied for the purposes of working up the variant. But again, it's not your actual variant. So again, no matter where you find your citation from, review the article yourself to make sure your variant's present and to make sure that you're gathering all the information that might apply to what you're doing. There's one other thing I wanted to say about HGMD. So when you look at HGMD listings, you'll see some are noted as, quote, DM or disease mutations. I would say please take this with a grain of salt. They will call anything that DM or disease-associated mutation if it's been seen in an individual with any phenotype that's been reported to be associated with the gene. So it certainly doesn't indicate phenotypic specificity. So again, make sure you review the actual publication to see if your patient truly has the phenotype that would make you call it specific to the condition. I know that you all are probably already familiar with the Mastermind tool from previous Biocurator working group calls, but I wanted to give it a little plug in here. It's, the paid version of it I think is very lovely. Unfortunately, my paid version is expired. The free version, I really miss the paid version. And I know that there are other similar tools in develop across the space of this technology. So let's say you've looked at those resources, maybe you didn't find anything, or you just found a couple of publications and you need to keep searching for information to help you on your quest to look up your variant. You might think to yourself, PubMed would be a good place to start to help me find literature. I will actually say that PubMed is nowhere near as helpful as doing literature searches in Google and Google Scholar. So PubMed, it will pull out an article for you if you're searching for a variant, if the variant is named either in the abstract or in the title, if it's a major focus of the article, but that is it. It's not going to your PubMed search is not going to help you find a variant that is listed in, maybe a table in the publication. That's where searches in Google and Google Scholar tend to be very helpful. So Google, it will locate a variant if it's in the article text, if it's in a supplemental table. Google also tends to be a little bit too helpful sometimes and will also find you all kinds of non-genetics related links. So it takes some time to get familiar with the output of your Google search to help you really figure out which links you need to explore and look into further and which ones you can kind of ignore. It's kind of funny when you're looking for variants in the ATM gene, it will find you ATM machines at addresses that have hits that resemble your variant nomenclature. And sometimes when you do find a supplemental table, you got to do a little bit of detective work to figure out what article it actually belongs to. We'll go through an example of that on this call. I'll walk you through one of those. Google Scholar is a little bit more limited than Google in that it's really constrained to published academic literature. And it seems to do a better job than actual Google or regular Google at finding variants in tables embedded within a paper, so like more like figure types of hits. But I think that looking at them both together is helpful. You can sometimes find different papers using this resource. When you're going to do a Google search, you guys have to build a search string. So what terms are you going to search? I found that it's effective to start with your gene name, use Boolean operators. So Boolean operators are these little shortcut terms like and, or, not, that allow you to build a search string and find what you're looking for. So I usually start with the gene, add and then several versions of the nomenclature, which I've got a slide where I'll talk you through some examples of how this might look for different types of variants. You'll see in these examples that it's helpful to take a generous approach to nomenclature. So the authors might not stick to our strict HGVS nomenclature that we are all supposed to be using when we are publishing in the genetics literature space. You might think about a paper that's a big table that they're trying to save column space, and the patient has a deletion of 9 nucleotides. Well, in HGVS nomenclature, you would list, C dot, whatever, and then each of the 9 nucleotides that is deleted would all be listed out. It'd be quite long. So in order to summarize that, some authors might take a shortcut and just say del 9. So you got to think a little bit creatively when thinking about your nomenclature options. Some tables are including genomic position, and they're separating out the nomenclature in a way that makes it difficult to search for. But sometimes genomic position is provided, which can be a helpful item to include in your search string. Some genes have historic names. So, for example, STK11, which causes Peutz-Jeghers system, used to be called LKB1. It's one of its AKAs. NBN, NBS1. So if they're alternate or historic gene names, you might consider building them into your search string. Likewise, alternate transcripts or different historic nomenclatures might be used in addition to HGVS, especially in older literature, which older literature sometimes gives you the best clinical information on a variant of interest. For MutYH, there are alternate transcripts for BRCA1 and 2. They're separate nomenclature that the BIC consortium used to use when they were first describing BRCA variants. I'll talk you through a little bit of examples for those as well. And then we also want to watch for an issue called push to the right, which I've got a whole slide on that coming up. Now, I know that we talked about alternate transcripts and nomenclature in a previous Biocurator working group talk by Dr. DeStefano, and she has an excellent article on the subject, which I would point anybody in the direction to. You might, if you're a clinical person who is looking at a lab report, you might see alternate transcripts or alternate nomenclatures given in your lab report. If you're curating out of the VCI, these may appear in the basic information section of the evidence view, as well as on the ClinVar variant page. So that can give you a helpful clue that, hey, there might be other alternate nomenclatures that might be helpful to look at. I would also say that if you're doing curation for an expert panel, the experts that are a part of your group, might say, oh, well, for MutYH, for example, this is, one of the common founder variants, Gly396ASP. They can probably very quickly clue you in that, you don't need to search there's 20 alternate nomenclatures for this gene. But there are many, many publications that use the first one listed here, the Gly382ASP. So your expert panel might also be able to give you some guidance on which alternate transcripts they for sure want you to include when you're searching for literature. Now I want to talk you through a couple examples of push to the right. So push to the right means that you have a normal sequence that includes some repetitive regions. So I've invented a sequence over here where the numbers at the top refer to the cDNA position. You have a string of CTG repeats followed by a string of A's. Let's say that when the sequencing is happening, they find a deletion of an A. You don't know which A it is. Does it really matter? It doesn't matter whether it's the first one or the last one. But HGVS nomenclature tells us to push the sequence to the right and call it C.29del.A, so as though it's the last A on the string. However, some papers might not be clued into this and might instead call it C.25del.A, just saying that it's the first one in the string, because you really cannot tell which one it is. So I would say that if you have a situation like this where you're having a string of nucleotides that are the same, use both the first and the last in your potential nomenclature options. Likewise, if you have a deletion of three base pairs in this repetitive sequence here, no matter which 3 base pairs are deleted, the surrounding sequence is going to look the same, and it's going to result in the same type of protein nomenclature. So again, if you have a deletion of this GCT here, the surrounding sequence is going to be CT, G, CTG, etc. If it's this one in here, it's going to be the same. If it's a CTG instead, it's going to be the same. So again, I would also take a creative approach maybe to crafting alternate nomenclatures to use in a search string based on if there's surrounding sequence, that if you delete the same amount of information, if the surrounding sequence still reads the same, it just gives you more options and more potential to find the literature that you're looking for. So here are some examples for literature search terms you might build based on different types of variants. So another little Boolean operator that you'll see in here is an asterisk, which is the wildcard operator, which finds anything starting with what precedes it. So let's talk through some of these over here. So for a nonsense variant, you'll see that the search string, I have first the cDNA nomenclature. This is the cDNA nomenclature, both without and with a space in between the nucleotide position and the nucleotide change. Some articles include a space in here, others do not. And including them in quotes will help you find this specific string of text. Then I move on to including different types of protein nomenclature changes. So the cDNA change results in arginine 335-TER, or shortcut language R335X, or could be also called ARG335-STOP instead of TER. TER is the term used by HGVS nomenclature, but again, STOP is used all over the place in literature. And then lastly, we've got the genomic position for this nucleotide change listed as well. For a missense variant, again, it's kind of the same thought, is you start with your gene and then add in the different cDNA possibilities as well as what you might see for the resulting missense change for the protein change. For a frame shift, this is where it's get a little fun. So for this MYBPC3 variant, let's say it's a deletion of a C residue. Some publications might include the C, some might leave it out. For the resulting protein change, some might include the whole, frame shift. That then there's a truncation after 7 residues. They might include the whole, the 3-letter amino acid code, or just the 1-letter amino acid code. They might just say frame shift with a little asterisk to say that that it causes a frame shift. So this will help you find anything that might occur after this after the missense change and then the frame shift position. For intronic variants, again, we have the cDNA sequence first, and then also the IVS, so the intronic position, which intron is it in. Some publications will just give this information. For an in-frame indel, this is another one where publications might try to save space in columns and leave out some of the HGVS nomenclature. So for an in-frame indel in this situation, instead of including the del TAC at the end, and the stop position for the deleted residues, They might just include the first, where the deletion begins. They might say del3 instead of spelling out all of the nucleotides that are deleted. And same goes for the amino acid residue that's deleted too. Now another one that gets kind of fun and interesting is, let's say you're looking for more literature on variants that impact the same missense change. So you're working up this TP53 variant, histidine 179 asparagine, and you want to say, okay, well, there's not much literature on, or let's say I don't find any literature on this specific change, but hey, maybe I want to work up and see if there are other missense changes at this same position that would allow me to maybe perhaps apply the PM5 criteria for a different missense change at the same amino acid residue. So in this is one where you might be able to use that wildcard operator, saying TP53 and his 179 asterisk, to find you anything, any change that occurs at this residue position. You might think to yourself, well, would it be smart to also include, not the one that you're looking for in the string, because you've already looked and you didn't find anything. You could do that, but then it might kick out an article that would return that happened to include both this variant of interest as well as a new variant that could help you out. So I would say just, don't include the not in this situation here, but stick to these two, and you might come up with some articles that will give you more information on other variants of the same residue. So this is, I'm going to show you an example of what you might get for a Google search result for this MYBPC3 frameshift variant. So I pop that into the Google search term, and you might flip out and you go, oh my gosh, 113 results. I have to look at all of these links. I promise you it is not that bad. You will be able to, over time, I promise it gets much more efficient and quick to do this. You will begin to recognize which links are worth pursuing and look into which are not. Oftentimes the links that it will take you to are ones that you might have already looked at. It might take you to, you'll see right away that this is the link to the variants listing in ClinVar. It is the link to Nomad. It is the link to the LOVD database, which can be helpful if you haven't explored those already to help you get to them. Several articles might also appear that mention the gene. They mention some other gene with the variant with the same nomenclature. So again, it's just always helpful to pull the source article to make sure that it's this exact variant in this exact gene that's mentioned in the publication for review. And again, I will say that it is a little bit daunting at first when you start this process, but it is a process that becomes easier with time and experience, and it becomes easier to recognize which hits on your search are going to take you to useful information and which ones are unlikely to be fruitful. And so so this is really the best case scenario is we did our Google search term using these terms over here in our search string, and one of our hits early on is a PDF file that's titled Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Clinical Phenotype is something something. And then we see that this article looks to be by S.K. Viswanathan in 2017. We're seeing some terms pulled out here, and the rest of our search hit result that seems to talk about our gene of interest, so this looks very, very promising. And so when we click on our PDF link, boom, it opens the article right up here. We are able to look at it and say, oh yes, this article contains our variant of interest. It is helpful. Wonderful. This is very much our best case scenario, which unfortunately is not the only case scenario. So like I've told you before, ClinVar is usually one of the search hits that you get. It's typically on the top of the search results. So well done, ClinVar folks, with getting your Google placement very, very high. Another thing that you will often see are LOVD entries. So here's just an example for this particular variant. This is what the LOVD entry looks like. When you click on the variant, it takes you to, oh, there's this paper, Erdman 2003, that appears to list this variant. Well, then we look it up. We go to the paper. We look it up in PubMed, and we can find somehow hopefully get a hold of the article and be able to look it up to make sure that it contains our variant. The last example I'm going to show you is one where a little bit of detective work is needed. So sometimes on our Google search hits, we get a mystery document that appears to be very helpful. So this one over here, this is what you see in your search terms. So it's a supplementary data, it's a Word document. And it looks to contain our variant of interest, like, okay, cool, that's our gene, that's our variant, all right. But you really have very little information as to what article this came from. So some areas we can find some clues. So first off, I guess one area to look at is the name of the link up top in green in the Google search term, GIM, to us genetics folks who might instantly go, aha, genetics and medicine. This also turns up in the name of the document. So when you open the document in Word, up at the in the very top Word document bar, it will tell you the name of the document. And so this one this is just what I copied and pasted. It says it's called GIM. So okay, again, probably genetics and medicine. And then we have some numbers that could be dates. Maybe 2010 is the year of publication. Maybe 12/5 is month and day, so December 5th. Maybe it's day month. Maybe it's the 12th of May. Same thing over here, this 2/4, maybe it's February 4th or April 2nd. We don't know. But 2010, I would suspect that's a year. This looks like a name over here. And so I would say maybe Funk is the last name of somebody who publishes. So it could be the first author, it could be the last author, who knows. And then this number that follows, this maybe 2006 is also a publication year, who knows. Maybe it's also some type of article number used by the journal. And so taking these clues, let's take these clues to the Genetics and Medicine website, which has a little search function over here. And I would take these items and pop them into the available search terms. So I'm going to say, okay, maybe FUNKE is the name of one of the authors in the paper. I'm going to guess 2010 as a potential publication date. It already gave us genetics and medicine, so let's click on search and see what we get. And thank heavens, we found a match. So we found this article from May of 2010 that talks about dilated cardiomyopathy. This is all promising. The senior author is Brigitte Funk. So we look at this article and our variant is found. You can also usually quickly access the supplemental document, and if you look at that and it's the same as what you pulled up from Google, then you know you found your article. So those are just some examples for what you might find in Google. For Google Scholar, again, the same search term doesn't get you 113 results; it gets you 1 result. And again, it's a different publication from the others that we had found in our previous searches. So again, this would be a paper that you would want to look at and see if it contains helpful information for your cause. Now, I also want to give you some words of caution about when you're looking at literature. You might find the same individual or family reported in several different articles. Occasionally the authors will recognize when their family has been published previously and cite the previous publications, but this is often not the case. Sometimes you just kind of have to use your spidey senses and get a sense for when this might be happening and be wary of it. Because as we know, for many of our expert panel groups, multiple unrelated probands might ramp up the level of evidence that we're applying for certain criteria, like de novo criteria or phenotype criteria. So some clues that can help you understand, is this the same individual or family that's just reported multiple times? Things that you would look at, for one, would be overlapping authors. If the patients all seem to be coming from the same research group, they're more than likely it's the same person being reported multiple times. Sometimes within the article methods, they will describe maybe the IRB that recruited the patients, or how the patients were ascertained, what cohort they were a part of. If it's the same one individual and it's the same autism research study that is reporting the same variant in the same individual, it could very well be the same person. And then finally, if the stars seem to just be aligning way too consistently with respect to clinical details, if if gender is aligning, if the age of diagnosis, ethnicity, if family history features are all seeming to really be aligned among multiple publications, and it's a rare variant. And again, if that and several of these factors line up, most likely it's the same person that's being reported multiple times versus separate individuals that just all have the same variant and similar clinical features. Okay, so I wanted to leave the rest of our time together for questions or for any discussion. But I hope that our time together today has given you a little bit of insight, if you haven't done this type of work before, to help you understand that this is a learning process. It's not something that you're going to be perfect at when you start right away, and that's okay. This is something that you truly do get better at, and certainly more efficient at the more you practice and the more you do it. Certainly using some of the database resources that have already gathered gene and variant specific information can be very helpful to make this go faster and to help you hone in on helpful literature. I hope that the nomenclature term examples that we talked through are going to be helpful and help you build Google and Google Scholar search terms that are productive. And finally, I know I've said this 9 million times already, but just always verify that your specific variant is actually included in the source publication. The version of these slides that are going to be used for the future Biocurator training purposes. I very much want to thank the curators that are a part of the PTEN variant curation expert panel, especially Melody Purpish, who is a clinical counselor who volunteered to join our group and help with variant curation, who really learned the process from scratch. And helping get her up to speed is really what informed me on how to help somebody get up to speed on this process. So I thank her for being my guinea pig, and being patient as I figured out how to train somebody to do variant curation for our expert panel group. And then also, again, thank you to Jenny for inviting me to give this talk today, and Stephen Harrison and Becky Siegert, who's one of the biocurators at the Broad, who had also reviewed these slides for the Biocurator Working Group talk.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jessie. That was really helpful. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question. This is Courtney. I hope you can hear me.
No, it's not me. No, somebody is having a lot of static.
Yeah, I'm going to
take back to the center role.
Sorry, I just muted everybody. I don't know what that background was. Courtney, I'm going to try and... Can you unmute yourself, Courtney? There we go.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Courtney.
Oh, hi. Thank you, Jessie. This is a wonderful presentation and very helpful. I did have a question on whether or not you have found it useful to add the RefSeq number for a variant in your searches.
I haven't, but I don't want to hold back anybody's creativity. Have you found it helpful for the variants you've worked up?
We're starting to look at a few things and have found that it can be helpful and pull out where people have, again, mentioned it, as you said. But one thing is with LitVar, they definitely go by the RefSeq number and the transcripts associated with it. So that's another way to kind of get out some literature better than PubMed, is with a RefSeq number.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I don't know what LitVar is. What's that?
Oh, LitVar is the equivalent from basically PubMed meets ClinVar, and they go through to highlight where variants have been reported in literature. So it goes a little bit more from the abstract into some text and different things. So it might be an alternative search engine that could be useful to pull out data.
Okay, any other questions for Jessie? There is a bit of background noise. I'm trying to figure out where that's coming from. If there are any questions, can you please just put them in the question answer box? and I will make sure that I unmute you because we had a lot of background noise. Any other questions for Jessie? I'm sorry about the background noise. Oh, so here's a question, Jessie. Do you search for the gene and each variant nomenclature separately or in a single string? I just tried adding the cDNA with a space in it, and it decreased the number of results in Google. Thank you for that question, Nikita.
No, that's an excellent question. So Google is funny. Sometimes you will search the exact same string on 2 different days and get different results. So I just say do your best. Yes, it sometimes you can take the approach of separating them each out and say PTEN and the cDNA, and then PTEN and the protein in completely different search terms. But much of it, at least just in my experience, I found that results in so many duplicated hits that I personally feel that it is a better use of time to just include them in parentheses like I showed in the examples. So include like all the search terms in one string, enclose them in parentheses with the ors between them. And that does a fine enough job of finding all of the literature that might include anything in that search string without you having to repeat looking at the same papers over and over and over. Or, again, sift through many different pages of a Google search repeatedly because the same hits are coming up. So that's just my tactic. Again, if you're more comfortable separating them out, that's fine to do. I just think it takes a lot of time. And I think that the process of combining them is able to help you be a little bit more efficient.
So, Jessie, do you have a standard approach that you use then? I mean, obviously there are all these different search engines, but and if you're not comfortable answering this, that's fine. But I'm wondering if you have like favorites, or where do you typically start? Like, what would be your kind of number one to go to, and then kind of move down from there?
Yeah. So when I'm curating for ClinGen, when I'm working, for as a PTEN Biocurator, I'll start with HGMD. I'll go to ClinVar, and then from there I'll do Google and then Google Scholar, because for PTEN there's not a dedicated database like there are for some of the other genes that have compiled a bunch of this information. But I feel like Google and Google Scholar are just helpful to do always to find things that aren't captured by other resources.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess, so many sort of tricky things like legacy nomenclature as well. I mean, you mentioned some of that with the push to the right, but, some of these variants that would be called like IVS1 or whatever. I suppose if you're aware of that nomenclature, you can plug that in your search as well. But sometimes you don't know until you find it, right? So it can be really challenging. So any other questions for Jessie? So please just, actually there's another one in the, okay, so this is a follow-up from Nikita. I think you said this, but to clarify for myself, does searching for a nonsense variant with an asterisk work, or does the asterisk result in a broad search for anything at that residue?
Oh yeah, the asterisk absolutely results in a broad search for anything at the variant. So that's really tricky. Because when you're searching, that's why for like the frame shift variants, including the FS before the little asterisk can help limit that some. But yeah, asterisk it's a real toughie because it's going to find you anything that that follows that, the search, the terms that precede it. So know when you're searching specifically ASP 50 asterisk will not only find nonsense variants, it'll find you missense variants or a synonymous variant, really anything that includes those terms. So again, hopefully you including the, let's see, I would say one strategy to try to eliminate that is maybe do a search string where you leave out the term that has the asterisk, and just use like the ASP50 ter, D50x, ASP50 stop, and then maybe do a separate entire search where you do the ASP50 asterisk to see if it's giving you a whole bunch of stuff that looks promising that are different from the hits you got before. But I mean, I frankly wouldn't use that combination in my search term just for a nonsense variant, just because again, you're going to get so much stuff that doesn't relate to what you're looking for.
So follow-up question, again, on the use of the asterisk. So even with the quotes, so if you did P dot asp 50 asterisk within the quotes, it will still look for anything in that position, right?